Hello everyone and welcome to the Farmer Supply Association Agri Report. I'm Randy Klepechka, agronomist with Farmer Supply Association. We are filming and taping on September the 11th. We're anxiously awaiting the track, the results of hurricane or the remnants of Hurricane Francine that are scheduled to come through on Thursday night. Of course, it could cause a lot of problems for our rice farmers. That combination of wind and heavy rain is really tough and can cause a lot of lodging with our rice. Either one by themselves is not so bad, but you get the rain and the wind combination, it can be pretty ugly. So, we're certainly concerned about lodging of the rice crop when this goes through. Of course, some other problems as well. And we actually got some soybean farmers that could use a little bit of rain. For the most part, this would be negative and certainly not positive. So hopefully we can maybe just get a little rain if anything, and it can get on out of here. But certainly concerned about the wind-rain combination. Harvest is generally going very well up to now and ahead of schedule up till now. Again, that's could change quite a bit, depending on Francine. And like always, we've got people that are done. We've got people that finished up last week, with harvest already, and pretty significant acreage and already done. And then we've got some that haven't started. So we've got everything in between. But overall, we're certainly ahead of schedule. Talking about rice yields have been pretty much good to excellent. I've heard very few poor yields. I've heard some average yields, now and then. Usually there's a pretty good reason for those, but by and large, just good to excellent. Looking at varieties, even some of those varieties that normally don't yield that well, are yielded pretty solid this year. I'm not talking about they're not busting the bin or anything like that, but some pretty solid yields out of some very average yielding varieties normally. And I'm talking about some things like CLM04, PVL03, the Max Ace variety. They're good varieties. They've got a place, but certainly not top end yield potential. But they're doing well for those guys that have those this year, so they're really happy. And some varieties just doing very well. Ozark, you're looking at the conventional varieties, Ozark doing very well in a lot of cases. CLL18, which has been grown on a pretty good acreage this year, is doing very well. People are very happy. I haven't heard any, or very few problems with the CLL18 this year. Of course, the hybrid's always going to have the high yield. 7302 is kind of one that's really shown this year, but all of them typically, with their really good yields. So just seems like no matter which variety you're growing, hybrid you're growing, you're doing well with yields this year. So, what's the reason for this kind of yield situation with our rice? If you've listened to me over several years, I've always had, what I think are four of the big keys for making good rice yields. And these are, things that you don't have total control on. You've got to have some weather, patterns and events going your way for these to happen. But I want to go over those four again, and we pretty much had all four of those in most cases this year. Number one, get planted and get a stand, fairly early in the window. Get started planting in late March, get everything planted in April, get it merged in April. And if we can do those things, usually we're set up at the start for good yield potential at least. Now the hybrids, of course, we can go on up into May usually and still hold up with pretty good yields. But with our varieties, that's a huge key is that early planting. We got started this year. I think some of the earliest I saw planted was March 29th, and then most of the rest of it was planted in April, or a lot of it was planted in April. Looking at emergence dates. Really that mid-April period, I know one guy I worked with, he was calling me with some emergence dates, and it was like everything was April 17th, and this guy farms 2,000 acres of rice. So, we got really good early emergence. We had some dry weather right after planting that kind of slowed things down, and we finally got some rain, and it just all came up at once. So, a lot of mid-April emergence, which is just, near perfect for getting that high yield potential in most years. Early season weed control, specifically, of course, talking about barnyard grass and the grasses. And of course, the key to this is getting your residuals out. You've heard me harp on that for a long time now, getting those residuals out, getting them activated, and getting an overlap out in a couple of weeks. And usually doing that a couple of times. I really like 3 applications. Sometimes 2 will get you, but I really like that 3rd residual application out there to really, make things even better, especially if you get them activated. So, we pretty much had that this year. Now, one thing we early on, that very early planted rice, we had to go close to a couple of weeks before we got good activation. So I was worried about that, but seems like things worked out. Once we started getting activating rains, we started getting more of those, and overall, grass control very good. You can find always some grassy patches here and there, but overall, I think if you use these residuals properly, got them activated, you had some pretty good grass control. Of course, our annual sedges have become more of a problem lately, and we really need to work on those with pre's as well. Our white margin sedge, our rice flat sedge. So, Bolero as a delayed pre is very good on those. And as we get on into late April and into May, about the time that those flat sedges start coming up, always remember they don't come up early in the season. They usually, in May before they start coming up. So we need something out there then if we're planting late. Sharpen can be a good one there. And otherwise, Boleros is probably one of the better choices for those. So, getting those out there to control those flat sedges, which have become more of a problem. Number 3, getting that adequate rate of nitrogen, or a little better than adequate, getting at least that recommended rate of nitrogen out there, or a lot of people push that a little bit, which I think is a good thing if you don't have trouble. If that hadn't resulted in lodging or other problems for you in the past, push that recommended nitrogen rate just a little bit, and I think that's usually going to be a good thing. Get that out on dry ground, get the water across it, and maintain that flood, really from there on out, ideally. But again, getting it out there, getting that fertilizer in the ground, that's key number 3. Key number 4 is just good weather during that reproductive stage. From the time that joint starts moving on through heading and through grain fill, pollination and grain fill, getting that good weather. And when I talk about good weather, I'm talking about mild to moderate temperatures, not excessive heat, and a lot of sunshine, because those are the things that are key to getting pollination and grain fill after that. So, again, those are the 4 keys. There's some other things as well, but they're things maybe that you've got a little more control over, insects and disease management, and scouting for those and getting those controlled when needed. Water management, as well. So, those are things you've got some control over, but those first 4, you really got to have some weather to help you. So we pretty much had most of those this year. Looking next, while yields have been good, milling yields not as good. A lot of average milling to well below average milling I've been hearing lately. So, what are some of the factors that contribute to these? These are, to me, they're becoming too common lately. Used to, we seem to have more good milling yields, and now it just seems like we're talking about poor milling every year. So I don't know what all's going on there. Maybe just some weather, some variety issues. I don't know what all's going on there, but something is, because it just seems like it's all too common. Some of the factors, of course, varieties can be a big factor. Some varieties just aren't prone to consistent good milling, and some are. You look at your medium grain varieties. Of course, we didn't have as much medium grain this year because of the market situation, but medium grains are usually pretty much always going to mill really good because they're that short, fat kernel that doesn't break as easily. So, medium grains can certainly are normally going to yield more consistently. The Previsia varieties are usually pretty good millers as well. But you look at some of the rest of the varieties, they can mill good, but they can also be inconsistent, especially in those years that are not good for milling. They can fall off quite a bit. So varieties can have an impact. Probably the big impact is the wetting and drying of the kernels. When that rice gets down below 15, certainly in that 12, 13 range or whatever, and we start having periodic showers or even just heavy dews can be a part of that. That drying, that re-wetting, consistently going on causes the fissures in the kernel, the cracks, and obviously they're just going to break when you mill them. So that's a big factor, is the wetting and drying after we get those moistures down there below 15%. So not a lot we can do there. It would be ideal if we could have staggered maturity, but we all know in the real world that just doesn't work. Because when it's time to plant, you're going to plant if the ground's dry enough to plant. So it's hard to spread those maturity out. If we got 2,000 acres of rice that dries down at the same time, it's going to be hard to avoid this, and it's hard to avoid it, management-wise anyway, but just because of what I said before. When it's time to plant, you're going to plant, and it's just hard to hard to manage that in practicality. So wetting and drying, certainly maybe the biggest issue of all. Insects and diseases, they can weaken the kernel, damage the kernel, cause light kernels, which are more prone to break during the milling process. So anything we can do to manage insects and diseases can help somewhat. Draining too early can result maybe in some light grain that is not filled out as well as it could, and it's more prone to breakage. So that can be another factor. So all those things, varieties, wetting and drying, insects and diseases, draining too early, all those can contribute. But usually the big one's going to be the wetting and the drying, and also the varieties and their impact on that as well. So some of the things you might can do a little bit about, but a lot of them are kind of out of your control, to a large extent. The university really has put a more concentrated effort, I think, this year into looking at some things, because this has become such a big problem that they're looking at, anything we can do. I mean, they're kind of just throwing the darts at the dartboard, and we've got companies that recommend some foliar products that they say can help milling. Well, the university's looking at some of those and just some production practices that maybe we can do to kind of help on this milling issue, because, as I said, it's just become all too common over the last few years. So hopefully they can find some answers for that, and certainly I think they'll be talking about that at our winter meeting. So hopefully we can learn something in the next year or two on that. So that's where we're at with rice harvest right now. Just kind of anxiously awaiting what happens out of the remnants of Hurricane Francine. Hopefully it's not as bad as we think it could be, and we can avoid that heavy rain and wind combination and not have a lot of lodging and other issues from that. So until next month, this has been Randy Klepechka with your Farmers Supply Association Agri Report.